So welcome once again, dear friends, and it's my joy to be with all of you this evening. My name is Gaurav once again, and it's a great privilege to be sharing this satsang on the Gita, Bhagavad Gita this evening with all of you. So I chose a passage which I want to share and then offer some thoughts on the passage. And this is from the chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, The Supreme Science of Knowing God. And it's 4:17. And even the preceding verses, Krishna is talking about, the nature of action, right action, wrong action, inaction. And so I want to read a few verses from this and then, like I said, offer a few thoughts. He says, though acting, I am without attachment, nor do I desire any particular outcome from activity. He similarly, who is one with me and identified with my nature, is unfettered by the slightest desire for the fruits of action. He continues, understanding this, the nature of right action, the wise since earliest times have acted dutifully. Be like them, acting without desire for the fruits of action. What indeed are action and inaction? Even the wise can become confused on this point. I will explain the distinction, armed with which knowledge you will be freed from all evil. And Swami offers a brief commentary here, which I want to read as well. He says, the wise here are those who have not yet attained the highest state of nirvikalpa samadhi. Actions performed with full divine awareness will always be dutiful. With the wisdom achieved even in sabhikalpa samadhi, however, from which one is still obliged to return to outward awareness, the ego can still hold the thought, I am the doer. In this simple thought lie the seeds of all evil, dormant but waiting. And then Swami says here, again, he says, one can act with great energy, working himself to exhaustion, and yet accomplish nothing. For example, by pushing strenuously on both sides of a door. Right action, spiritually speaking, is action with that attitude which leads to soul freedom. That attitude includes non-attachment to the fruits of action and acting with the consciousness that God is acting through one. Action that is inspired by his consciousness and energy, with the results given to him without any ego involvement, is right action. So that's a beautiful passage on right action that Swamiji is talking about, Krishna is talking about. And this may be your experience, it has been my experience, certainly at some times in my life. Like Swami says, you can sometimes work yourself to exhaustion. Even in service, we sometimes can, serve very, with great zeal, but perhaps, or during our daily work, if we have a job or we have a business, and often, there can enter into our consciousness, into our mind, a feeling of strain, anxiety, or, fear or worries or tensions while we are working, even while we are serving. And really, Swami said that really right action, spiritual action, even hard work, which is, one has to serve, let's say, in a physically demanding, mentally demanding way. He said even hard work, when it is rightly done, it should be effortless. And that is kind of a hint to all of us. And he said it should not involve strain. And to the degree that we still find that whatever actions we are doing, even if it is service or if it is work, if there is strain, if you are feeling tension, if you're feeling it is such an effort, then it's a hint to us And a hint of what? Really, because that to some degree, Swami said, at the back of our minds, we still have the thought, I am the doer. And all those strains, all those tensions arise from that very subtle thought that I am acting, I am responsible, I have to get this Seva project done, I have to get this task done. And as long as that focus is still on the I rather than what needs to be done, there will be and can be strain. And so we want to get away from that. But it is not easy, like Swami said and Gita says, to distinguish. And Krishna says the nature of right action is very difficult. And many times in life we find ourselves wondering, is this action right? Is that course of action right? And it can be very confusing at times to know what is right action. And Krishna also says, right action is not which others think is right, or which society views as right. For example, building a hospital, it doesn't necessarily from the highest standpoint mean it is a right action. So how do we decide what is truly right action, and personally for us, rather than in a general way? And I remembered that based on Yogananda's teachings and Swamiji implementing them, especially in education, for children that we follow in our various schools, Ananda schools. Swami gave a system, and others formulated a system which basically sees how a child evolves and how we can work with him. And they divided it into 4 grades, you can say gradations of consciousness. The first being, a heavy consciousness. The second is called a contractive ego consciousness, ego active, contractive consciousness. The third is called an expansive ego active consciousness. And the last one is called a light consciousness. And this system, just understanding, has helped me personally in determining, like I was saying a moment ago, what is right action, or what I am doing in my life, whether it's service, whether it's work, whether it's doing a job. Is this action leading me to freedom, like Swami said, which should be the parameter of all right action? And how really you can judge it is by this very simple system. And Swami says that when a person is with heavy consciousness, you can think of that also as tamasic consciousness, activity. And he says the predominant thought when we work with a heavy consciousness, we might tend to see work as a burden. Often it's like, oof, I have to do this work, and there is a sense of burden involved. And often we may act out of a fear of punishment, that if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, then this might happen, my superior might take me to task. And that is the underlying feeling, in heavy consciousness. One step above is a contractive ego active consciousness, which is better than the first one. And this one is when it is driven by self-gain, now not so much from punishment, but it is driven by self-gain. You might be attached to a reward, that I act because I get something in return. It could be something tangible, it could be a promotion at a job, it could be money, it could be whatever, but it is something that motivates us to act. And it's not bad. Like I will share in a moment, this is directional. And so this is the contractive ego active stage. And then one stage above that is called the expansive ego active stage, in which we act, we are perhaps generous, we are truthful, we give to others, but it is conditional. We perhaps do it with a few people, select people, let's say, who we like, and we act with them in that way, but not with everyone. And in this stage, it's interesting that often we may act not for some tangible reward, like money or whatever it might be, but it becomes subtle, and we might act to, let's say, please someone, or we might act because of the thought of receiving, not something tangible, but praise. Or we might act out of the desire to, it becomes subtle validation or being acknowledged for what we did. So which is certainly, it's one step above the second stage, but it is still evolutionary. And finally, the light consciousness, you can say a completely sattvic action person, is one who acts freely, willingly, joyously, giving freely to all, and not wanting anything in return, either something tangible, not wanting even the slightest praise, acknowledgement, nothing at all. And that, is someone who is a light consciousness, someone who's a Brahmin truly in their consciousness. And, for you and I, this is very important, because as truth seekers, and it's good to ask ourselves whenever we act, whenever we do any act, small or big, whether we are working at home, taking care of our family, whether we are at the workplace, we are following orders, we are doing work, or even when we are serving, let's say if we are in an ashram, we are at one of the centers, we are serving, always at the back of your mind, keep this system in mind and ask yourself often, because see, none of us are anyone, we are a mixture of all of these gunas, and at different times, different of these qualities become manifest in ourselves. So this is not to judge yourself if you one day find that you're acting, let's say, for a reward, but just know, okay, I'm there and I just have to move. I don't have to jump straight away to become a saint. All I have to do is to go one step higher and maybe let go of that desire. I remember, Swamiji sharing a story, recounting a story from his life. And he said that many years ago, when Ananda Sangha, the communities we know, when the very first community had started, and he started that in, the rural countryside of Northern California, he said that one day, soon after founding that community, maybe a year or two afterwards, he was taking a walk one day across the property, and he came to a point where he could see the entire, ashram, the property, the land. And it was evening time, and he could see, lights twinkling in the trailers and the little houses that the devotees had made. And Swami said, for a moment, he had the thought, I did this. Before, the land was barren, there was nothing here. Now look how there is life, how there is, whatever it, vitality, and so many people living together in harmony. And he caught that thought and he said, do I like this thought? And he answered himself, he said, no, I don't like that thought. And he let go of that thought. And he remarked later, he said, that was the only time that thought ever crossed his mind, that I did this. And which is quite a remarkable statement if you think that the thought never coming to him again, because in the years that came after that, he founded so many communities, he wrote, such great books, 150 books, each of one is of, really a masterpiece, so much of music, and so much that deserves praise, so much that deserves acknowledgement. But Swami said he personally, after that, never had the thought that he did any of that. And that is, I would say, a light person of extremely light consciousness, where we are all headed. But, we might find ourselves a little lower on the scale. But, as truth seekers, as devotees, it becomes increasingly subtle. And so watch when you want, if you want to know that, am I acting in the right way? Is this the right action for me? More than what you are doing, wondering that, is this the right task for me? Is this the right job? Should I be cooking instead of cleaning? Should I be cleaning instead of washing the dishes, whatever it might be? Or should I be, doing accounting or teaching? More than that, we have to, because those are things, life has placed before us, our karma has perhaps placed before us. So rather than trying to change that, the real lesson is, how am I acting in those circumstances? And so if you are at work, if you're at home, if you're at the ashram, if you're at the sangha, wherever you might be working or serving, just catch and try to see that thought, nishkam karma, which Krishna is saying, acting without desire for the fruits of action. That just doesn't mean acting and doing something and not wanting anything tangible in return, because as we progress, it becomes subtle. But watch yourself. For example, I'm giving this satsang right now, sharing, but if at the back of my mind, I'm thinking that, oh, or if there is a desire that I, wish that people would write and say how wonderful that satsang was, then still that is not perfect nishkam karma, that is still desiring, even if not something tangible, but it is still ego. There is a thought of ego wanting something, and to that degree that is not nishkam karma. Or if you're at the center and you are engaged, let's say, in decorating the altar, but and you might be doing it very joyfully, putting your heart and soul into it, but still at the back of your mind, very subtle, if there's a thought, or if someone praises you for it and you like that, in an egoic way, even if very subtle, still to that degree, nishkam karma is still a few steps away. And so watch your heart when you serve your family, when you are at work, when you are serving the guru. Above all, make sure that you are aspiring for that light consciousness, for that stage where there is no thought at all of what you will get in return, whether it's something tangible or intangible. Serve and try to serve as much as possible, just for the simple joy of serving, for the opportunity we get to be instruments. And when we act in that way, we find that there is a great deal of freedom in acting in that way. The little I have practiced of nishkam karma in my life, I have certainly not perfected it, but I have applied it in certain circumstances, and I have compared my experience, how I feel in myself when I don't practice it, and how I feel, like I was mentioning in the beginning, feeling strained, feeling tense, and when I have practiced it. And I thought of a simple example, which was that very recently, some months ago, I was in between jobs, so to speak, you can say. And at one point, I did not know where, my future expenses would come from, because, let's say my source of income stopped and I didn't have any money. So, I, having faith in God, in Divine Mother, I just said, I leave it to you. I can't worry about such things. And sure enough, some unexpected opportunity came by through a person who was a friend, but really an acquaintance. And they said, would you, create this meditation course? It's a, company based out of the US. And they said, would you create this course sharing your guru's teachings on meditation, on how to be happy? And I said, of course, I will do it. And the nice thing was, the bonus one can say is that they were also paying good enough that I wouldn't have to worry about my bills for the next 6, 8, 10 months. So I was like, okay, let me do this. Divine Mother has sent this opportunity. And just I, very recently finished working on that project. Last 2, 3 months, so a lot of intense work, putting thought into how to structure the course, who will be receiving it, will they understand these concepts, how long to make the course, how to present the points clearly, what stories, what examples to share. And like I said, a lot of intense work, very demanding. But and this is an example of trying to practice nishkam karma, that there was so much joy just in the thought of doing that seva, that project, thinking how people will benefit, that towards the end, as the shooting was about to commence, I really thought to myself, and I told Divine Mother, I said, even if they don't pay me a penny, it would have been worth it, and I hope they're not listening, because they might change their mind about paying me. But anyway, I meant it, that I felt that even if they don't pay me, it has been still worth it, because I knew, that we are sustained, like Swami says, like the Great One says, by the divine, and how Yogananda ji says in the autobiography, God can devise 1,000 ways to support his devotee besides the begging bowl. So I was like, if they come back to me and say, oh, thank you for shooting all these videos and for all this work, but we can't pay you. In my heart, I just felt I could just be totally at ease, still knowing I may not have money, but just knowing that I did it out of a pure desire to serve. And, God will take care of the rest. So if we can, with that sense, and why I wanted to share that story was that I could have acted out of, desire of getting something. I could have acted out of strain that I have to finish this. And, then let's say some monetary reward is coming, or I chose not to. And the difference is that there is much greater freedom in your heart when you can act when you can put out all desires from your mind, that what will I get? Will people like it? What will they think of me? Will it make me look good? If you can put all of that out of your mind, and dismiss that completely, then it just becomes just a very joyful journey and active, service to the divine. So I encourage you to experiment with it and maybe start with small things in your life, and maybe you already do. But if you do, try a little more. And like I said, watch yourself always as you act, small things and big things. And watch out, for the ego, because the ego is very subtle and delusion is very subtle. And Swami says that it always tries to intrude in the picture, that how do I stand in proportion to this situation? What do others think of me? What will I get out of it? And so it takes time. We don't leap suddenly from the heavy to the light consciousness stage, but it's a journey. And I encourage you to try it out. And there is great joy in the process. And when we do, really, then we have mastered the secret of right action, because right action is really simply has to take us to soul freedom. That is all right action is all about. So joy to you, and hope you can practice some of these things that Krishna shares, that Swami shares, and hope you can benefit and derive the joy out of practicing these things. So with that, I will just offer a closing prayer, and you can join along with me. And after that, we will just take a moment and share all the blessings of our life. And all of us are blessed in many, many ways, whether we know it or not, and try to always be channels of sharing, of giving to others all the joy that we feel in our lives. So